Hi everyone, it's Tammy Sharrow, and this is our second qualitative methods class, and this narrated PowerPoint is going to be focused on a little bit of review and then moving on to assess quality or rigor in qualitative research. So just a little bit of review. I'd like you to think about what paradigm qualitative research fits in, and if you think of that continuum that we've looked at in several different classes with sort of the positivistic quantitative paradigm on one side and then the naturalistic paradigm on the other side, where the researcher is more embedded, and we talk about it having the researcher having an insider perspective. So that's the paradigm we're living in now. Remembering that the type of reasoning used with qualitative research is inductive reasoning. We're moving from general observations and looking for patterns or themes, and then we may go on to develop a hypothesis and ultimately a theory, but not every qualitative research study is designed to create theory. The main one would be grounded theory. Other ones are just designed to explore or describe or understand. The fundamental values associated with qualitative research, if we think back, some of the values are putting the importance on the individual person's beliefs, values, perspectives. We focus on there being multiple truths. There isn't only one answer. That we value the context within qualitative research. And if you think about some of the benefits of qualitative research around nursing or midwifery, them being very holistic approach to their care, you could sort of balance and see the importance of qualitative with quantitative research when we're really wanting to take that biopsychosocial approach. And so that kind of answers this last question, when might we choose to use qualitative research methods? Well, certainly when very little is known about the topic. Sometimes that can help us go on to learn about a topic, and then we might build that into a quantitative research study. We might develop a measurement tool. That's one thing the chronic health condition study with children talked about, using the findings from this then to go on to develop a measurement tool around how children and families cope. So some of the advantages and disadvantages of qualitative research, certainly let's look at the positive, the advantages. It provides depth and detail. The scope of topics that you can explore with it is endless. It encourages openness, and as I mentioned, it allows us to explore individual or group experiences, perspectives, beliefs, values. It puts real importance on the human experience, and as I previously mentioned, can be used when little is known about the topic or to enhance understanding in preparation for a quantitative study. Disadvantages is the sample size is small and fewer people are studied, which ultimately limits our generalizability. It's difficult to really systematically compare. We're not gathering numbers, we're not doing statistical analysis, and sometimes based on researcher skill, the results could be variable. What's interesting is sometimes the quantity of data, especially around interview transcripts, hundreds and hundreds of pages of data in words, can be difficult to analyze and present. It used to be not as well understood in the research community, but it is growing and developing. Often there will be purely qualitative conferences focused solely on that type of research. And the other challenge is sometimes it's difficult to provide anonymity when the findings are presented. So you interview 12 people, they're in Calgary, Alberta, they're going to the HIV clinic, and so you can see how someone reading that article or hearing about that data in a presentation might be able to identify individuals that might have participated in that study. So the choice of qualitative methods, these are the 5 methods that we've explored: phenomenology, participatory action, grounded theory, ethnography, and the generic descriptive qualitative, which the chronic health conditions in children was. This week we're going to be looking at a grounded theory study. So what makes good qualitative research? Sometimes qualitative research has been criticized in the past, specifically by the quantitative paradigm domain, because they are concerned about, researcher influence, researcher bias. And so how do we put those checks and balances in place to assure that qualitative research is rigorous? And so Guba and Lincoln, who were some of the first qualitative researchers and established parameters around rigor, they made the statement, are the findings sufficiently authentic that you as the reader could trust the findings and trust yourself in acting on their implications or applying those findings in your practice? We're going to look at an article by Tracy called The 8 Big Tent Criteria for Excellence in Qualitative Research. And all of these 8 criteria have really been built into our qualitative appraisal tool that we use in this course. And Tracy describes them as common markers of goodness, while still celebrating the complex differences among various methodologies and approaches in qualitative research. So there's lots of different approaches, but they all need to have these common markers of goodness, these sort of criteria we need to meet. So we'll start with number 1, and that's the notion of the worthy topic. And this is under the credibility portion of your appraisal tool. So what we're looking for, is the research relevant? Is this a big enough issue? Is it a common issue? Is it a prevalent issue? And that relates to timeliness too. Is there something happening currently that could benefit from us exploring this topic? So I think right now around our whole worldwide pandemic and COVID-19, there could be some incredibly interesting qualitative research happening around that. So that would make it relevant and timely. Is it significant? Is it going to contribute to the research knowledge base? Does it have the potential to contribute? And is it interesting? Sometimes research funding bodies like interesting, kind of sexy research. So they need to be able to build a case as to why this research is important, and is it going to fill a gap? Is there a gap or a dearth of research on this particular topic? Number 2 is quite extensive, and it's called rich rigor. So what is rich rigor? So there's lots of different things that can contribute to that. Is the study built around a theoretical construct or a framework? So the one we looked at with chronic health conditions in children had a theoretical framework that the study was built around. What about data and time in the field? Was there prolonged engagement? Did the researchers interact with the participants for an extended period of time? And did they collect enough data to support, significant claims? And then the notion around the sample. Is the sample appropriate given the goals of the study? Did they choose the sample that is best able to provide data on the topic under study? So when we look at data collection specifically, some of the things we can think about is type of interview. Did that fit with the topic and the method and the participant, the length of the interview, the type of questions asked. Did they provide the schedule of questions? That can be really informative for the reader. Did the researchers journal? So maybe they talked about journaling either before they went into their data collection or interviews, or maybe they did some journaling immediately following. Did they auto-record and transcribe the interviews verbatim? And did they write field notes? The people in the Chronic Health Conditions in Children study wrote field notes as soon as they exited their interviews. Or if you're doing ethnography research and you're observing and you're out embedded in the population, are you taking notes? In the data analysis process, we like to see an audit trail. An audit trail is going to cover all the details around how the data was collected and how it was analyzed, sort of the step-by-step process. So this real transparency about the process of sorting, choosing, and organizing the data, coding, recoding, putting it into categories, all those kinds of things. Other key things around data analysis is, did they have external persons audit the process and the findings? So somewhat external to the study. An example you might see, they might call it peer review. So this is where the researchers ask colleagues or experts in the field to audit sort of some of the critical decision points throughout the process. Another thing that can add to this is if you intentionally select a diverse team of researchers. So the Chronic Health Condition in Children study had 2 nurse researchers. Some other studies, like the one we're going to look at this week, has nurses, doctors, social workers, all different, very diverse team of researchers that might look at that data slightly differently. Number 3 is sincerity. So this is where the study is characterized by the researcher's own self-reflexivity about their own subjective values or biases or inclinations that they might come to the research project with. We talked about that in analyzing data and talked about bracketing, where the researchers have to be open and honest about preconceived notions or ideas that could impact how they gather their data and then how they interpret it. And so the other piece of sincerity, openness, is transparency about methods and challenges that they encounter throughout the research project. And the upcoming study we'll look at did a really beautiful job of it. Number 4 is credibility, or what we call trustworthiness. And so here the research is marked by thick description or concrete detail in how they present their data. So say they interviewed and they come up with particular themes around the concept that they're studying. Do they show rather than just tell? So do they just describe the theme or the phenomenon, or do they incorporate exemplars or quotes from the participants to make that theme come alive for you? Another concept around credibility is triangulation and crystallization. You probably see triangulation more commonly. So this is where they might use multiple data sets. They might have interviews as well as journaling or observation, where they have multiple researchers involved, or they might have multiple theoretical frameworks. And I'm going to touch on triangulation, crystallization in the next slide, I believe. So remember that triangulation allows you to look at a concept from a variety of different perspectives, thereby validating your findings. Multivocality, do they provide space for a variety of opinions? And member reflections, do they go back to their participants to verify that what they discovered is indeed what the participants intended to share. So is it trustworthy in the sense that the members kind of reinforce that their researchers are on the right track? So when we look at crystallization versus triangulation, a lot of times in qualitative research, we might be trying to zero in on a single valid truth versus a complex, in-depth, partial understanding. So, example, say in the chronic illness in children study, with multiple researchers, multiple data sources, and multiple theoretical frameworks, they might be able to zero in and triangulate on a single truth. But sometimes that's not possible, and we may actually find that that the concept or phenomenon we're studying is very, very complex, and we might develop only a partial understanding. So I think of crystallization as an example in a link I shared with you on the study with MS, where she set out to interview people who were living with multiple sclerosis and actually discovered that there wasn't one lived experience, that every individual had a different experience. So that would be an example of crystallization. Number 5 is resonance. So here the research influences, affects, or moves you, the reader, or a variety of audiences. So either through transferability or what we call naturalistic generalization. So in quantitative research, we talk about generalizations. Is it generalizable to the broader population? Did it have a random sample? Those sorts of things that and strict inclusion and exclusion criteria. Here in qualitative, we don't talk about generalizations. We often use the term transferability. Could you see this research being transferred to a similar population? And so sometimes it's called naturalistic generalizations. So if I think back to the study we looked at on kangaroo mother care, and that was a quantitative study, but there's been a lot of qualitative studies on kangaroo mother care and mothers speaking to the benefits of that. So as a nurse working in the neonatal intensive care unit, if your unit wasn't currently doing that, could you see the possibility, the possible transferability for those findings? And then also think internally about your own self, and we call this aesthetic merit. Did the reading of this research article affect you? Had you ever thought about what it might be like for a child and family to live with chronic illness? Maybe you want to go on to be a pediatric nurse. Maybe you're currently a pediatric nurse and you found aesthetic merit in this particular article. Number 6 is significant contribution. So here we are asking ourselves, does the study explore something we know little or nothing about? Did it provide value? Does it extend knowledge or build on knowledge already? Or did it fill a gap where there was very little research or a dearth of research on a particular topic? And then did it contribute by going on to think about how it could improve practice, prompt change clinically? Could it go on to affect the development of policy or procedure? And did the findings go on to generate maybe ongoing research or ideas for future research? So what did this particular research study contribute? And you'll remember that a lot of this is often addressed in the discussion section of a research article. Number 7 is ethics. So we address this in our appraisal tool under credibility. But in order for qualitative research to be rigorous, ethics is a really critical component. So did they uphold those principles of the Tri-Council with respect for persons, concern for welfare or beneficence, and the notion of justice or equality? Other things that we can think about in relation to qualitative research that Tracy kind of alluded to was this notion of situational or culturally specific ethics. Was there anything about this particular study that might have raised ethical issues? Was there any particular ethical issues related to the relationship between the researcher and the participant? And then the notion of the researcher ethics when you leave the scene. So sometimes a qualitative researcher might be really embedded with a participant. They might be doing series of interviews. They might be approaching a very difficult topic, a sensitive topic. And so how the researcher exits or leaves the scene and goes about sharing results, lots of ethical issues around that as well. And the article we'll look at this week had some interesting sort of situational ethics around the notion of studying street youth. Number 8 is meaningful coherence, and we address this in our appraisal tool as well. So did the research study achieve what it purported to be about? So they have their initial purpose and aim or objectives of the study, and did they achieve that? And does everything in the study kind of hang together and flow? So the background problem, the purpose they set out, the aim, the sample they chose, how they collected their data, analyzed their data, the findings, does it all flow and hang together? Because in poor research, they might set out to study something and come up with, some weird and wonderful other findings that they didn't even set out to study. So if you look at poor research, it certainly exists and is out there and might even get published. It uses methods and procedures that fit its stated goals, and this notion of it meaningfully interconnects the literature, the background lit review with, as I mentioned, research purpose, the focus, the findings, and the interpretations. Okay, and so in our synchronous session, the article we're going to look at is the experiences and perceptions of street-involved youth regarding emergency department services. And what I really like about this article is they have a specific section allocated to rigor. I find that to be a real strength in qualitative research when they actually allocate a specific heading or section to this to truly support why they felt that their research was quality research and rigorous. All right, thank you so much for listening.